delighted to be hosted by the Embassy of Switzerland. We are heartily grateful to the Ambassador for inviting us and allowing us to host our MeetUp Addis here at the residence. So thank you very much. We have a very exciting evening for you. We have a really, I'm excited myself. My favorite coffee is Moyee, and so I'm really delighted that we've got Ahadu here with us. Before I move to our main program, I'd like to introduce the Ambassador first, Ambassador Mona Mona, to give some opening remarks, please.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, it's really my pleasure to host you all here this evening, to host this great event. I'm extremely excited to have you all here, and because I'm also aware that this is a very special edition as far as I'm concerned. When we started discussing about the Swiss Embassy hosting one of the SEE MeetUp, monthly MeetUp, we were first not aware that the day which was planned in November would actually also be the International Social Enterprise Day. So this is of course a great coincidence. This is the first reason, but then of course the second reason to have such a famous social entrepreneur of Ethiopia to be the guest speaker, and for me personally it is a whole new world I'm going to discover also with your presentation, and the occasion to exchange among the members of the association, but also with you on experiences of social entrepreneurs. It's always a pleasure for a Swiss Embassy to support an association like this, an association which works towards the common good, the development of a country, and we of course want to be part of that as far as we can be, and as much as we can be. And I would like to thank you, the board of SEE, for giving us this opportunity to actually be in your host this evening, and I hope we will have further occasions like this where we can support you in one way or the other. It's really a great pleasure and a very meaningful purpose, and for that our doors are always open, be assured. I also wanted to mention that we started to discuss this event with a small portrait of what the Swiss Embassy is doing here in Ethiopia. And we quickly also talked about our international cooperation. We are here in the field of health, in the field of migration, but also in the field of food systems. And especially in programs and projects in which we want to strengthen the resilience and the robustness of food systems in Ethiopia. But we are also active regionally, so this is not only an Ethiopia-focused activity, but it is also in Ethiopia that we support projects like this. And I see overlapping interests here, and I think that is also very much in our interest to actually connect the world's the entrepreneurial side, but also the capacity side in terms of producing food and producing commodities in a fair and sustainable way. And then having entrepreneurs with the entrepreneurial, sort of mindset to actually making out things out of fair and sustainable production. And this is really an exciting sort of cutting point. And we were lucky that Anderef actually supported our idea that we would also invite one or two of our partners in the food systems activities. And I'm very glad to see two colleagues from an important partner actually when it comes to food systems and organic farming from the Institute for Sustainable Development. And I'm glad you could make it as well, and I hope you all will have an opportunity afterwards also to mingle and to see how what work the Institute is doing and how that can connect with the world of entrepreneurship. With this, I would like to close. I know you are not waiting for me to speak, you are waiting the guest speaker. And I'm, again, very, very happy to have you all. And please, I hope you will feel well in this house, which we like so much. We hope it gives the appropriate and adequate framework and frame generally for this evening, and have fruitful discussions. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Ambassador. We love this house. We love the garden also. Thank you so much for having us here. Moving swiftly to, I'd like to introduce our president, the Social Enterprise Association President, Ahadu, who will speak just a few minutes about the association and our social enterprise.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Ambassador Tamara Mona. We are very happy. You know, I love the space. I want to come very frequently. I'm a bit excited to be here. I don't want to take much of your time. We are being called social enterprise. We are trying to mitigate social problem with business model. So we boldly say that the fate of this country is entrepreneurs. So we challenge the government and every stakeholder that this is very important for the country. So the ambassador says I am not speaking anything, but I want to recognize my board members. Can you raise up Ayatam, please? This is Ayatam, one of our board members, and Melat. Thank you very much. These people are, he's working in sanitation entrepreneurship, and she's working in food. So we are very much happy to have a lot of entrepreneurs to join us to strengthen social enterprise, so that at the end of the day we need to have a legal framework for this country, so we can really help the country and help ourselves as well. So briefly, let me share only one reading from my today's reading. Very much inspired by the book called Conscious Capitalism, written by John McKay, with the owner of the food chain. He said that, like, the example and the analogy that he wants to give is the caterpillar and the butterfly. The caterpillar is like the main reason for why the caterpillar is in this planet is just to eat. And after birth, it eats sometimes 100% of its size. So there is a process called, a natural process called metamorphosis. When the metamorphosis came, this caterpillar changed itself to butterfly. The butterflies pollinate. The butterflies, you know, did the good job for this planet. So each individual, I want to ask yourself, do you want to be a caterpillar who eat everything and die, or you want to pollinate? Business should be a sort of pollination. My presence should assist other people. Otherwise, if you are here for money and money and money, it will be very difficult. We can't keep the environment, we can't keep the community. Social problem, social enterprise concept, in my opinion, I'm an acumen fellow, is the only way out for the world. Not only for Ethiopia, but for the world. Solving social problems with a business model. By saying this, I would like just to leave the floor for Ahadu. Ahadu, thank you very much for everything that you are doing for social enterprise. You are doing this job. It is not due to the fact that we pay you. We know that. It is due to the fact that you practice with social entrepreneurs. Thank you so much.
I think social enterprise is really about purpose. Really, it's about what God, if you believe, or Allah, or if you don't even believe in God, if you're an atheist, it's about how the legacy that we leave behind when we live this, the legacy we leave behind when we leave this planet. So we want to inspire all of you to become social enterprise. If you're not, I know the majority are social enterprises. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our honored guest, Ahadu. Ahadu and I interlinked a few years back when I was heading the Social Enterprise World Forum. We didn't get a chance to get him as a guest. So I'm really delighted that we have him here today. I'm inspired by your story, and I'm just delighted that you're here. May I ask you to come?
So perhaps since we're also talking about entrepreneurship, let me just talk a little bit about how I got here, and probably that may be a good start in terms of how I started my journey, because there's a lot of challenges in terms of how we got here, and maybe I can talk about, a lot of people know us as Moyee because, you know, that's the advantage of creating a brand, because you guys see us in a lot of the supermarkets, so on and so forth, but 70% of our portfolio is in farming. 70% of what we do is in farming, and we work with close now to 4,500 outdoors smallholder farmers that we work for. They're actually the backbone of our business. So a little bit about me. I finished 11th and 12th grade undergraduate and graduate studies in the US. I studied in Washington, DC and New York, then back in Washington, DC. I was actually a trader in commodities. So around when the market collapsed around 2000s, I think it's 2008-ish, I was tired of what I was doing and I was looking for a good opportunity. And Ethiopia was in the process of starting the commodity exchange. I mean, a lot of people know ECX, a lot of people know about Dr. Leni. So it was, the country was actually looking for a talent to actually start the first commodity exchange. From the beginning was to set it up, to transition into a local talent, and to move out. So I came in to start a commodity exchange. I mean, again, Dr. Leni was the CEO, I was the COO, which is the second person in charge of the whole operation. The commodity exchanges actually started with a very noble cause to actually make an end when the whole famine happened in Ethiopia. The one thing that we discovered was one part of the country was starving, on the other side of the country had a lot of surplus. So the problem was there's not enough flow of communication, and everybody knows, and we see it on coffee all the time. We keep on thinking when there's a shortage, coffee prices or commodity prices continue to go up. That's not what happened in Ethiopia. There's a lot of surplus, but this side of the country was not talking to that side of the country. The farmers think that prices are gonna go up. They keep on hoarding and hoarding and hoarding. 74% of the food went wasted because it expired, because there's not sufficient warehouses, not enough communication, so on and so forth. So we saw there's a lot of appetite and need to start a commodity exchange. So we started with a staple crop, but because of the foreign exchange shortage, the government decided at that point to introduce cash crops such as sesame and coffee into the commodity exchange to make sure that they have a good tap of control of the foreign exchange inflow and outflow. So that's how coffee started. I didn't know anything about coffee at that point except commodities, but I just been lucky, to get that opportunity in the commodity exchange. So I end up, drafting the contracts, establishing the warehouses. It's more of a city boy turned into a farmer story. I mean, one day I was in New York City, the next thing I was in Matamma, Humara, and all of these places. Just, I was sleeping on the floor and, hiring people. There's a time that I hired 700, 800 people and just being blocked in the borders of Ethiopia, but an exciting opportunity. So then when I was actually drafting the contracts and seeing how it's being traded, and I get to travel and I get to see it and so on and so forth, that's how, I fall in love with coffee as well. And it also gave me an opportunity to see what we're doing right and what we're not doing right about coffee as well. So at that point, I automatically, so it was a 5-year contract. As I was transitioning, I said one opportunity was to go back, and I just said, there's a lot of people do what I do if I go back versus if I stay here, maybe I can make an impact. So that's how we started. So I was actually, I noticed while I was at the commodity exchange, 99.7% at that point of Ethiopian coffee was exported as green coffee, non-value added. So I just said, so who's tapping into it as well? Then if you're actually looking at the value proposition, an average, so if I can give an example of how we did last year, an average packed coffee was traded, give or take, for $9-10 per kilo. An average green coffee was trading for $2-3. So there's a huge, that doesn't necessarily mean it comes into the roaster pocket, but In a country like Ethiopia, where we're actually starving for foreign exchange, everything comes in forex. So the airline or the shipping lines get benefit, the roasters get benefit, the farmers get benefit. So we try to make sure the packaging industry, so the whole line and the value chain can actually benefit as well. So when we're looking at it, I just thought that was a great opportunity, but one of the challenges that I just saw, breaking into the international market. So if you're looking at the coffee belt, again, 100% of the coffee is growing more of in Latin America, Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, then it comes into the Africa belt, Rwanda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Kenya, but nothing gets grown in. Just to give you guys on a side note, do you know who the biggest coffee exporter in the world is? No. Trader. Exporter means you actually get it in. From a production perspective, it's Brazil. From the biggest exporter of coffee in the world is Germany. So what happened is, they actually buy it from the rest of the world, they do the value addition, or they have a trading houses, and they're actually taking it out again. We actually, I wish Madam Ambassador was here. Actually, we have a big lawsuit with the EU now. If you look at, for instance, Germany, which is the biggest trader, there is no taxation when it comes to green coffee because there's only a few countries that actually export coffee. But if we try to export value-added coffee in Germany, it's about 35% taxation because the multinationals are actually it's the top 6-7 exporters control about 90% of the value-added coffee supply chain, just like an oil and gas. So then when I think it's very important, I think then when I actually left the commodity exchange, I just said, what was the niche? I think that's what we were trying to say. I just said, from my perspective, I think it's a story. The birthplace of coffee, why don't we just try to do it in terms of a value addition? But then I start thinking about in terms of what's the niche. The niche is our story, the niche is our connection with the farmers, and how do we make sure that we have this transparency and make sure that the farmers actually directly connected. So less middleman. If you're looking at the coffee value chain right now, from a typical value chain have about 14, 15 layers from the time that the farmer actually producing it by the time the end consumer actually start drinking it in a coffee growing country. In our perspective, we actually got it down to 2, 3. So big value add, and actually it also make sure that our value proposition is actually much greater and we can actually connect to our farmers as well. So that's how we started. Then I was speaking about the commodity exchange. I think it was the World Economic Forum about 10 years ago, and I was getting ready to leave, and I was talking about coffee and so on and so forth, so I met some people. I was getting ready to leave the commodity exchange. Then I just said, what if we try to partner up and try to get this Moyee story out and try to export out of Ethiopia? So that's how the whole thing, I was speaking, some people approached me, and I just said I was leaving, and I just said, let's start actually doing it. So we started creating our sales department in the Netherlands to actually promote, because it's much easier to push it out of it as well, than actually a lot of the value proposition in terms of the connection to the farmer, the roasting, and so on and so forth. So when we started it, again, as I mentioned, probably 2,000 kilos was being exported. Right now, I think last year we probably exported close to 200,000 kilos. So it's enormous. And also, again, the value proposition in terms of how much we can get. I have to caution, not everybody wants a roasted coffee out of Ethiopia. There's a lot of blending, people do a whole lot of stuff, but they still have a lot of niche. Even if we can get 10% of Ethiopian coffee as a value add, we can easily quadruple the forex that can come into the country as well. Again, $2 versus exporting it for $10 as well. That's how we pretty much started. Then we said, when we actually starting it, and I just said, what is the value proposition? And everybody talks about fair trade in the coffee world as well. So fair trade is pretty much the buyer shakes hands with the seller. In this case, let's say the farmer, for instance. You just want to make sure that you're actually giving that farmer the fair value. Fair value can be subjective, but that's how fair trade is. As long as you can pay poverty rate, which in our case we don't like poverty. We don't call it poverty rate. I think we call it living wage, because poverty, again, is very subjective in what that means. So then I just said, okay, then everybody likes this fair trade idea. because if we do everything in Ethiopia, let's not call it fair trade, I called it fair chain. So in a dummy word, fair chain is nothing but fair trade 2.0. It's an extension, and rather than looking at the trade, we're monitoring everybody in the value chain. And because of the connection that we have, less middleman, again, from 10 to 12 to 2, 3 intermediaries in the middle, then we can afford to pay a little bit more. Then our first value proposition is by calculating that, what if we pay 20% more to the farmers? And we call it a fair chain. Then what if then we extend that, and across the board in our employee chain, we pay 20% higher? Then we can actually get it into more of a competitive world. In my life as a farmer, you see a lot of migration from the cities now coming back from the farms to the city, because it's really not sustainable. I mean, a lot of people are farmers. You don't see a lot of commercial farming. And in Ethiopia, where 90% of our farm is owned by smallholder farmers, everybody's a farmer not because it's a sustainable or they like it, they can see to grow, they see the growth in it. They're actually in there because their father is a farmer or their mother is a farmer, and the minute they get an opportunity, they migrate to the city as well. And when you ask a lot of questions, why is it? It's really not sustainable. So the first thing is, how do we make sure this is sustainable? And the first one is, we want to make sure that we can compensate our farmers so they can stay there, they can, make enough money. And everybody likes this farmer story, and we want to take care of our farmers. But farmers are like you and I. Everybody, if a farmer have 1 donkey, he wants 2 donkey, he wants 3 donkey. Or if he has 1 TV, then he wants 2 TVs. I mean, farmers are also capitalist in nature as well, like any human being. So we want to make sure, how do we attract them? How do we make sure that they're sustainable? And the first thing that we noticed is, we want to compensate our farmers more. So then, when we're actually looking at the legal framework in Ethiopia, at that point there was an Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. It was very difficult to actually connect to the farmer, and that's why we actually needed, or we end up having our own farm. The reason we have our own farm is we can pay our farmers directly. So part of it, I think, we still have a good position. We manage now close to 1,500 hectares, making us probably the 7th or the 8th biggest commercial farmer in Ethiopia. But again, the big chunk of our farms, we buy from a lot of our growers around it. So we pay them 20%, but because we're paying them 20%, they also bring a good cherry to us as well, because we know we pay more. So for us, it's a win-win. We're paying more, but on the other side, because we're paying more, they want to make sure that, or we can afford to actually ask the farmer, make sure you can do, we can train them, and we only pay you the 20% higher for good cherries as well. So end up becoming a win-win balance as well. Also, by being on the ground, we get to do a lot of training. Now, what we call also now, as the first one is I talked about the fair chain. Now the second thing is, now we can also talk about climate smart farming as well. So now we're telling the farmer now, as a second layer now, if you can actually make sure you don't cut into trees, and you make sure that you have a sustainable farming, you take care of the environment, no child labor, so on and so forth, then we can actually pay you another 10% higher. Because again, we do a lot of the processes in-house. Again, we can afford to do more to a lot of our clients as well. So now we started, so fair chain, climate smart, we're on the ground, we do a lot of training, so to make sure that they're actually sustainable and they make a lot of money, we're on the ground, we train them a lot, and the other thing that we're doing is also, actually, Hermela is actually managing it, we're doing a lot of training on the ground to make sure that how to do organic farming, how to do rainforest certification, and so on and so forth. Then when we do it, then the last piece that we identified is there are a lot of roasters in Ethiopia. I think the last time that I checked is 256 roasters, but most of them is done in a very traditional way. So then we noticed the barrier to entry is so complex. Anybody can be a roaster, but the minute that you try to go into certifications, by itself $20,000-$30,000. The minute that you try, then there's different kind of certification that you need to do. Then automatically, if you want to compete in the highest level, if you want to go by sea vessel, at least you need to have 6,000-7,000 kilos. Otherwise, you have the whole container, and if you're putting 5 kilos in there, if you put 10 kilos in there, it's not sustainable or it's not profitable. So we end up doing it by airplane. If you do it by airplane, it's probably on the average export price by vessel is 30 cents on a kilo. If you do it by plane, it's about $4 or $5. So then sometimes your logistics cost is actually much higher than even the coffee cost as well. So the barrier to entry, unless you get this economics of scale, is so complicated. So then we said, how do we make sure that we get volume? How do we make sure that we also have a state-of-the-art facility? And I think maybe we can connect with that. I don't know. I very much encourage for you guys to come and see our roasting facility. We now have probably the biggest or the second biggest roasting facility. We now have a capacity to do close to 6 million kilos per annum. Very state-of-the-art facility. It took us a very long time to get here. So now we can actually attract, then I also have part of our fair trade policy. Then I think part of the idealistic perspective is we also want to make sure that we do business based on quality. So we believe in operational excellence, and can we go head to head with the Starbucks, with the Edis of the world. Then part of the fair trade philosophy is we believe in trade. I don't believe in aid. So an aid comes in, and eventually that's not a sustainable process as well. So like anything else, there's a lot of NGO programs. Unless you tie that with a more of a sustainable, capitalistic kind of model, it's not going to work. Because you can train the smartest person at the farm. The next opportunity that he's going to get a scholarship. He's going to go to Switzerland. We're not going to see that guy again. So how do we make sure that this thing is actually a very sustainable model? How do you attract, you retain, you train, and make sure that this is a sustainable model? And part of our 20% growth. The biggest problem that I had until recently was, how do I attract a very good talent? I attract a very good talent, and we do a lot of work with Heineken, then Heineken takes my people away because they can afford to pay 20% or 50% more. Then I became a training ground. I always used to joke around, I became the CBE of, CBE is known for training all these bankers, and they give it to these private banks. So then how do you make sure that, because my competition, as much as possible, if you want to create the next multinational, a coffee brand out of Ethiopia, then you have to compete at that level. So you need to make sure that you get the right talent. So how do you attract that talent is also one of the biggest challenges that you have as well. Because my competitors in the domestic market does not have any of the costs that I have. So how do we break into that entry was also a difficult and one that we need to address. Then the next one, then I think if one of my biggest lessons is that how do you create a brand? And I actually underestimated, how much money and how much energy that we need to create a brand as well. This year, the international coffee price. So if you're looking at, let me give you an example. So in the last, if you look at the last 6-7 years, last year coffee prices went up. So Ethiopia was very lucky. So we took. I also on the board of the Coffee Exporters Association. We took a lot of credit last year. Ethiopia, I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of coverage in the media, good year for coffee, Ethiopia got a lot of money, we've done all this work. The reason is it's just a windfall. We got lucky. Yes, we've done a lot of good things, but international prices went up by 50-60%, so we were able to sell a lot of our coffee for 50-60%. So what the projected $1 billion, now 1.4 billion. This year coffee prices are gonna come back. Let's see how whether we can repeat or not. So creating a brand, so coffee prices are very volatile. So that's why we need to create a brand. But if you look at the Nestle, the Illy, the Starbucks portfolio, because they create a brand, you're buying Starbucks, you're not buying green coffee as well. So Ethiopia, we go to 600 million, then we go to 800 million, then we go to 400 million again, because we're price takers, we're not price makers. That's why we need to make sure that we have a brand, and I want people to make sure that I'm buying a Moyee because I like it, I like the story, for whatever reasons. I like the package, I like the people, but just creating that story is very important. And I think that's why, I have a feeling prices is coming down, but I don't think our coffee prices would go down as well. Yes, at the end of the day, you have to pass it in a market as well, but at least we would not be a loser in this case because we're selling a brand as well. So that's actually, I mean, I see it as Ethiopians in general, there's something that we not do is we're not good branders or we're not good marketers as well. I mean, the facade is as important as the content. I mean, you have to see it. I used to be a consultant in my previous days. So the minute that you have this McKinsey kind of presentation, nice PowerPoint, you think the content is fantastic, although the data can also be the same. How you present it matter, how you package it matter, and how you tell your stories matter as well. So that's how that we're planning to do it. Then, how do we get into the next phase is, how do we also make sure that we're also on the edge in order to push forward? How do we compete with the other ones? We're actually starting now a sustainable packaging, which makes us one of a leading roasters in the world to introduce into the EU market with the sustainable packaging model as well. So you're not wasting it, you can reuse it, and you're getting away from these plastic models, so on and so forth, into a sustainable model as well. So that's part of the whole sustainability. How do we make it? Then the other thing that we're actually doing is, I don't know if we're also one of the leading roasters to actually try. It was a lot of challenge. I mean, the pilot is still there, but it's taking a lot of time because the country challenges. 3 years ago, when everybody talking about blockchain, we actually introduced the blockchain model in the coffee as well. So if you look at our export models, Madam Ambassador, I brought you a very nice coffee. I roasted yours personally myself, so hopefully you'll so if you actually scan it, there's a barcode that we actually introduce a blockchain model in our export packages. Unfortunately, because of the country condition and foreign exchange, and coffee is a very strategic commodity, we have to export all of our good coffee. Only the byproducts are allowed to be used locally. So because of that, we don't have a lot of freedom to come up with the different packages, and we can't really market, this is Yerga Cafe, this is Guji, this is Sidamo. We have to use whatever that we have in the local market. That's Moyee or our competitors for that matter. But if you look at our international packages, we now have a blockchain model that you scan it, and I've talked about part of it is our brand promise, but how do you make sure that we're also accountable to our brand promise? So we introduced blockchain to make sure that we're accountable. So you actually scan it, and it tells you how much we bought the coffee, how much we bought from each farmer, how much it cost us to wash it, how much it cost us to dry it, how much the logistics cost was, and then how much the roaster was, so that we have the whole supply chain in there as well. And you actually can see a picture with actually where you get that farmer from. So we now have 3,000-4,000 farmers in there as well. Then, about 2 years ago, I introduced a model that just says tip a farmer, which actually was very much a hit, which made me famous for a couple of days in the international media. So you can actually look at, then you can actually say, tip a farmer. Once you scan it, then you can actually give them $2 more and throw a blockchain model, and it goes back to the circle, and it goes back to the farmer as well. Again, part of the problem is a lot of our farmers don't have a bank account. That became a challenge. Transparency is still a big problem in Ethiopia, and people don't want to know how much money they made, so that became a problem. Technology, electricity, and all of that kind of stuff. So because of that, we can't really expand it in terms of the way that we want to go. But there's also an opportunity for people to actually work in that way as well. How do we make sure we make a lot of our farmers that are bankable? So although I don't think we've publicized it enough, so starting this year, our biggest client is going to be IKEA Foods. Very sustainable program, exactly for this thing as well. We took them to the farm. They make sure that we have a very transparent company. They believe in the mission, and we can actually prove it. Now, IKEA is probably one of the biggest households that's going to partner with Ethiopia, and they looked at everything in Africa as well. They selected just Moyee because of our brand promise that we said we do. But taking these guys took forever as well, so it actually requires patience, like anything else in terms of when you're introducing the whole thing as well. So that's how we actually started. We started from a very small villa. If there was a presentation, I could show a lot of pictures as well. It was just employee 3. Right now, we probably have close to 186 people. And if you look at our farm, then our farms probably have in thousands. So from an impact perspective, what gets me going is looking at a payroll that we pay for our farmers. A payroll take up this much paper as well, and to see how much an impact, and the residual impact as well. If you look at one farmer had probably 4 or 5 dependents as well. So if we work with 5 farmers, then we multiply that by 4, that's 20,000 people that are actually dependent in our value chain, and that we're very much excited about. So then part of the brand promise, then we started from a farming, then start roasting. As of last year, we started a cafe business now. We're now cafe number 2, 3. If y'all guys haven't seen it, I encourage you to come actually see it and see the experience. We actually roast in there as well. So we're actually rolling it out to become 3, 4, 5, and hopefully, I think we'll have 5 by the end of the year. Then the next one is as part of our multinational agenda. We have a bit in the airport, Shreveport Airport in the Netherlands, and probably we'll do one in Kenya as well. From our brand perspective as well. So that's the number of people that we have. We now also, our sister company also manage 1,500 hectares of farm. So if you want to know what a hectare is, I just learned that the way you multiplied 1 hectare is 10,000 square meters. So it's just enormous. But then again, I mean, I can talk about some of my challenges, anything that happened in the world that happened to me, so I can tell you some of my examples when we actually embarked in the farm business. I've seen lion when we're actually developing a farm, a lion sitting in the ground. So you don't dare to cross a line. There's a lot of taboos as well. You don't even, we have all these drivers. You don't even talk about. You're not even supposed to talk about a farmer in the street. If you talk about it, he come back and bite you in the middle of the night. So that's the taboo from the drivers. So we actually were parked there for hours until the line crosses by. Any kind of political tensions that we actually weathered it in there. A typical, my friend, I know you are also in the farming stuff. Then when there was a big tension at that point, Wogo's coffee was discovered, whether it's in Kaffa or in Oromia. The legend has it that coffee was discovered in the area of Kaffa region back in the days, but in the city of Jimma. So when we did the redistricting, when EPDRF did the redistricting, so Jimma became Oromia, Kaffa became the south. So there's a lot of tension now as coffee was discovered. Note that the international, I don't want to get into politics, that's not, I'm just a farmer, but the international market doesn't give a damn where the coffee came from, whether it's Kaffa or something, but we're biting ourselves in terms of, I mean, people pay for good coffee. We're very lucky that coffee is discovered in Ethiopia as well. But instead of actually promoting Ethiopia coffee, we actually have a lot of bickering in terms of where's coffee discovered from, and so on and so forth. But I'll leave that for the politicians. But anything that can happen, so we were blocked in there for ages with our international buyers for 4 or 5 days in terms of how we're gonna pass by. So anything that you can think of that's, I talked about, we have the I call it the crop to cup model. So from the crop, then we actually take it all the way to the value chain to the cup model as well. So I call it our crop to cup model as well. So I talked about some of our clients in terms of how we got, I mean, it took a lot to get us here. So anything of the certification that you can just think, you just have to pay the dues in these, years. The one thing that I actually learned in this business is, if you're actually building a brand, I mean, we can easily be traders and we can make a lot of money, or may not make a lot of money, traders make, traders lose, but building brand a long time as well. And I think as an Ethiopian, it's another thing, we don't believe in this sustainable model. I think we need to think of in terms of how do you create institutions. Institutions are here to last. A lot of our PLC models owned by the father and the mother, so then you have a kid, if the kid becomes a doctor, you're in a coffee farmer, that business goes out. The only institutional model that I see in Ethiopia are the banks. I think that can be also a good model. Shareholders, they actually have a good audited books and so on and so forth that you can just see, they can continue to grow and they can continue to invest as well. So I think that's something else that as Moyee that we're trying to create, not actually a PLC. We also have foreign investors in our model. We have Dutch investors. How do we create an institution that can, outlast the Ahadu and the rest of the management team that we have as well in terms of creating something that Ethiopia can be proud of, and and an institution that actually can outlast, can sustain, so on and so forth, and something that we need to be something in terms of. If I talk a little bit of our challenges, let me start by, for instance, logistics. It takes twice as much to ship our container from here to Djibouti than it goes from Djibouti to Rotterdam. Just we have this inefficient logistic systems as well. So how do you make sure that you address that? The political climate is also, it's getting, somewhat better now, but the political, there's a first mover advantage, but there's also a first mover disadvantage. So there's a lot of people say, how does this thing work, and how does, so we have a lot of the what if scenario, and how do you make sure, so we have a lot of, bureaucracy, a policy that we have to battle, that actually, we want to make sure that we want to make sure transparency. At that point, everything has to go to the Ethiopia Commodity Exchange. From our fair chain perspective, we want to make sure that we need to shake hands with the farmer as well. So if you go to the commodity exchange, it automatically became a commodity. You're just buying a grade 1 limu or grade 1 yirgachefe, you're not buying that farmer coffee as well. So we have to fight a lot to make sure that we have a transparent system, to make sure we're shaking hands with the farm, with the farmer. So that's some of the challenges. I mean, a process that's supposed to take. Another thing that we're also fighting for now is how do you compete with a lot of our competitors next door, Kenya? And I see part of the problem is in a country where foreign exchange is a very scarce material, you call it, is bigger than life. It's so difficult to do it. So we have a very controlled kind of commodity because of the strategic nature. Because all of our foreign exchange comes in from coffee. So it's so regulated, it's so difficult to be creative. As a roaster, I go to the authorities and say, I want to buy a Ugandan coffee and I want to blend it and I want to roast it because I can buy the green beans from Uganda or Kenya for $1. I want to do a value add in Ethiopia and I want to export it as $10. Because that's what happens in Switzerland, that's what happens in Germany. You buy all these coffee from different countries and actually can create a ratio. Now, Starbucks have a model that they buy 20% now because of transparency and so on and so forth. It's becoming very difficult. But for a very long time, I saw a lab in Seattle where Starbucks uses a very little bit of Ethiopian coffee, blended with somebody else. They have it into a science that they can give you an exact yirgachefe profile or an exact Sidamo profile as well. It's the same thing. How do we make sure that we are so competitive? Because of the environment that we are, the government is so nervous if I import Uganda coffee or Kenya coffee, and as it is, we have a limited foreign exchange, so it's a trade-off. The small gain for the is pound. I think it's penny wise, pound foolish. In my thing, but I see why they're actually doing it. And my perspective, I don't mind importing all of these coffee as well. Create a profile, because not everybody else in the world may be excited in Ethiopian coffee as well. It's a great coffee. It's the best coffee in the world. But it may not be for everybody else as well. Some people say it's very acidic, some people say it's very strong. It is also what the market is used to. We have a lot of our African brothers and sisters in West Africa that are actually so used to very low acidic, might take very cheap, or they call it a Robusta coffee, which grows 4 or 5 times in a year. So it's very easy to cultivate and it's very easy to do. So how do we make sure that we actually start selling to the rest of the world? Because if you're actually looking at the Ethiopian coffee by itself, you can't compete unless you're doing it for very high end and for a very specialized product. You can't compete with Ethiopian coffee in the international market. Our prices are not there. Very good coffee, shade grown. You have to hand pick it. It's not mechanized. We just don't have the economics of scale. The technology is not there. So our coffee is good, but our coffee is only for the top 10% of the consumer as well. How do you make sure that you attract the 90%? So that's something else that we actually need to do it as well. So that's some of the challenge as well. The other thing is also, as a country, what actually worries me is productivity is still where it is. I can't roast, or even in a green coffee product, we can't export what we don't have. I don't see any research that came in coffee for a very long time as well. So we need to have a lot of these research institutions that needs to come in. You call it CBD, like disease resilient varieties. How do you make sure that we become very productive varieties as well? So a lot of the work that we don't have, because I can't roast, we can't export, we can't sell what we don't have. I still think we have a lot of land, we have a lot of virgin land, and how do we make sure that we actually give it out to the right people and we actually go into commercial farming, and we can actually, if you're looking at our production has not increased probably 5, 7, 8% in the last 4 or 5 years. That needs to double. That needs to quadruple. I know there's a lot of work. I think for me, agriculture is the low-hanging fruit. I know the government is trying to do a lot in the, mechanization and manufacturing, so on and so forth. It takes a very long time to actually get there. In fact, you need a lot of raw input to actually get into manufacturing. I think for me, it's a lot easier to actually, work a lot more in agriculture work on a lot of our productivity and actually increase our output as well, because our productivity is still where it used to be before, versus if you look at Vietnam, that started coffee production very recently, in the last 15, 16 years. They now actually have 4 or 5 times more production than Ethiopia as well. So how do we get there? I think we need to do more research. And so part of the challenge in Ethiopia is we don't have a lot of commercial farming. So it's difficult to teach all these 25, 20 million farmers in terms of organic farming and how do you mechanize it and so on and so forth as well. The other thing is also the whole value creation. I'm actually now lobbying, for instance, organic farming. If you do organic farming, you get 20 organic, not farming, if you get organic certificate, that piece of paper probably worth 20, 30% higher margin, higher premium when you sell your coffee as well. Because you have the organic certification, say, oh, this coffee is certified. As a commercial farmer, I can afford to do it because I have the economic scale, or anybody who has a commercial farming. But that's only 10% of Ethiopian farms, or 8% is commercial farming. The other 90% is the smallholder farmer that they're not getting a fair value. If you're telling me that we need to go as a blanket organic farming for our farmers. In fact, our farmers are the ones that they don't have enough money. They don't use chemicals and they don't use fertilizers in their farms, not actually the commercial farms as well. So we need to actually work as a country how to make sure the whole Ethiopia organic, because the farmers actually does not have that financial capacity in terms of doing it as well, and how do we make sure that the value proposition in our farming process as well. So I think perhaps I should stop. If you let me, I can go on and on and on and on and on. So and maybe we can make it a little bit more interactive, and if you guys have any questions, and maybe I can answer. Usually the first one, the person that asks the first question is the one that's gonna be very shy. So go ahead and ask, and maybe we can open the house and can try to answer any questions that I don't know if I missed anything.
Can I kick off? I'm going to ask you that question. Would you do it again?
Yes, I'll do it. I'll do it again because of the impact, the self-satisfaction, the amount of people that I actually work with, but I probably will come with a different state of mind. I always tell people need to do their research on, and they need to make sure that they do the research. I honestly thought I didn't think I was gonna get old and getting to where I am in terms of how long it takes, so on and so forth. So I probably would do it. I mean, in hindsight, things are 2020, so it's very easy looking back. I probably will do it, but I probably would come in a state of mind. Then probably the impact would come more, and my 5-year horizon, I probably would make it a 15-year horizon as well. So I probably would have done it again, but obviously, like anything else in life, then if you have to do it again, there's a lot of things that you can correct. Yes, I'll do it, but the biggest thing is, I just underestimated how challenging it would be to get to where we are. And I'm actually fortunate, but there's a lot of people. It's a very complex. So it's only 2 companies. I mean, everybody knows Tamoka, for instance. Great coffee, great brand. But if you look at the export market, between Moyee and Tarara, other competitor, we control 80% of the export market. So that's how very difficult it is to export 77, 78%. I know you're recording, so 78% to be exact. So I just underestimated how difficult, how complex it is to get into the whole thing as well. So if you're investing everything that you own in this business, then it would, it's very difficult to actually exhaust. So I probably would have done a better planning in terms of, maybe I would have started the farming first and I would have gone to roasting versus the other way around. So I probably would have done a little bit of research in terms of that needs to be done. Yeah, but I like it, and I think it's a very fascinating commodity. So. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the very nice presentation. I really like Moyee, even the new coffee shop. It's really high standard and it's really class for Addis. I just want to ask you, if you can tell us a little bit about your branding, because you have very beautiful branding, logo, everything.
Yeah.
I remember when you started, you used to have gift cards. You have very beautiful art pieces and everything. So since we are social entrepreneurs, so it's really good if you tell us
Yeah.
about your brand strategy.
No, that's a good question. Can I take I brought a bag. Something that's so this is for instance we create. I mean, a lot of the stuff is on our website. I created a bean guy. So the bean guy, I created just a coffee bean. I make him more of a bean person. So we cross the forest is, for instance, slowly washed, slowly dried. So we have the bean guy that is taking a shower, that is he's being slowly roasted, and he's slowly dried and sleeping, the bean guy. Then I also try to explain what our fair chain principles are: quality, not charity; trade over aid; shared value proposition; half of the CO2 of normal coffee. The other thing that we also do, as part of a sustainable company, we actually look at our CO2 monitoring as well. So by doing it in Ethiopia, that's another value proposition, which is all in here. By doing it in Ethiopia, by roasting it in Ethiopia, so when you roast a coffee, there's 20 to 25% is a roast loss. So we're only transporting the consumable product as well. So the logistics is much cheaper, less CO2 because of transportation and so on and so forth. That's also another value proposition as well. But you're right, the branding is extremely key. And so our big brand promise is the shared value creation between a consuming country and producing country. So our goal is to create 50-50 of the value creation between because I talked about the fair chain, then the fair chain looks at everything in the chain. So how do you create the 50-50 value creation between the producing country and the consuming country? So by doing value addition in a country, a lot of the income gets stayed in Ethiopia as well. So everybody thinks this is an M. So these are, if you look at our logos, these are two mountains that we're trying to create on our logo. This is one, this is the second. So these two, we try to make sure there's a plain leveling field. The two mountains are equal. So this is the producing country, this is the consuming country. So the two mountains, so fair, equal proposition in our world as well. Then the other thing is, I think we've done some work in terms of our brand static, brand, the branding and so on. We try to not to shortchange it, and if you're actually giving it if you do it for passion, and actually, that's what I tend to do. That's why I don't make a lot of money, because I mean the coffees I probably could have built it in half, but we keep on redoing it, and we keep on redoing it, we keep on investing a lot. But it's very important in terms of in the long term, then, and as a return of a short gain. So even the word Moyee, I don't know whether you guys know what Moyee is. It's I'll tell you, it's also an Oromifa, but I'll tell you it's the crusher, the traditional. So we actually float a lot of names in terms of for end consumers in terms of what. So they like Moyee, but what I like about Moyee is a crusher, but it's also an Oromi. Every coffee producing area, Kafa is also, they also call it Moyee, and Oromifa is also called Moyee. The other growing area, which I did not know, was around Harar, which is also a very good high-end Ethiopian coffee. So one of the driver, we bought a Harar coffee a while ago, and he told me the other day, like about a year ago, he came in and he was chewing chat and all that kind of stuff. He said, I like the name Moyee. And I said, oh, do you know what that means? And I was trying to explain, Romifa and Kafa, it means mukacha, and I was trying to explain to them, no. In Harar, it's also mukacha, but for chat. So I love it from the universal, the name of it as well. So I think everything, there's a story behind it I think it's also extremely important, when you create, your branding in terms of that needs to do it as well. But we also do a lot of work with your branding and your facade makes or breaks as well. And unfortunately it costs a lot of money. Unfortunately it takes a very long time to build the brand. But when you build the brand, you have a lasting impact as well in terms of, how you get there. Other questions?
My question is two. So the first one is, have you ever thought of specializing in the coffee industry? As in like civet cat coffee, if you ever heard about it?
Yes.
Have you ever thought about introducing it in Ethiopia?
You know, the Ethiopia market is so complex, and it doesn't allow us to do it. So it's just, I mean, at some point, you know, it's so much that you can do. It took us forever to get here. So, you know, what's the easy win, and what's the bigger impact as well? Yes, that's a good concept, but do we want to do there, or do we want to start a decaffeinated coffee for the local market, which is non-existent as well? Last year, we started doing, as part of our sustainable program, for instance, we started now specializing it. I think Moyee was the first company to export cascara. If you guys come to our cafes, we now sell it as well. So cascara is the husk of the coffee. So right now, you know, when we process it, the outer layer, we use it as a fertilizer, or at the farm gate, they use it as to make fires.
Yeah.
But which one pays more? It's the fire, or if we're actually selling it? So we actually start exporting it now. We now have a cascara drink in our cafes, and we start selling cascara as a special product as well in the international market. So we're now selling it in Dubai as well. So there's so much that we can do. But in our farm, is we actually have some creative. You know, our farm is one of our big farms is in Kafa. I invite whoever is interested. We have a very nice lodge that we actually, it's not a commercial lodge, but we actually, you know, do it to actually strategize, think. You know, we invite a lot of our buyers to come in as a retreat, so on and so forth. So talking about a brand, because you asked me as well, we now have, I discovered the oldest coffee tree. So everybody, you know, coffee was discovered in Kafa. I mean, what the legend have it, coffee is discovered in Kafa. And in Kafa, it's around Bonga, and we have 483 hectares. So we wanted a commercial farms. So I'm actually discovered one of the old coffee tree, which I call it the mother tree. I'm also claiming sometimes when the buyers come, and I just said this may be a potential, well, Kaldi and the beans will actually find it as well. So we actually fenced it, so people actually like to come and chill. So any beans from a Kaldi tree, actually we sell it for a lot expensive as well. So it's one of the oldest tree as well. So it's all about, you know, the branding in terms of how we specialize. So we do a whole lot of stuff, but it's just a matter of there's just so much that we can do, and some of these things, you know, you have to have a market for it, and, you know, promoting it, and, you know, so on and so forth. So there's just a lot that needs to be done before we actually address it as well. The problem is, again, we're price takers. So, and, you know, the market is not there as well. So that's why. But I mean, things are changing also, hopefully. You know, what I like about that stuff is you see a lot more roasters that are now coming up, and so on and so forth. So it's actually good. And I think the country is moving in the right direction. That's exactly what we want. The outgrower was non-existent when we started 5 years ago. Now, you know, we have a lot of outgrowers that people actually shaking hands with the farmers, and, you know, buying directly from the farmers. The farmers at some point where we actually used to get a lot of fight. I know you invited some co-ops before. So the farmers used to sell to these cooperatives or to these unions. Now we created another avenue that you can also, if you don't want to sell to a union, you want to sell it to us. So we gave them another avenue. Then me and the union stopped fighting as well. It's a good thing for the farmer, but we took a lot of flack from the unions, which are very powerful as well. By the way, this bracelet is something else that we introduced. So these are like, we try to teach the farmers, these are like the red beans. So by giving them this bracelet, we're just telling them, make sure you only pick only the red cherries as well. So very easy, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't last that long in their hands, but it's actually something else that being creative in terms of that we do to promote a lot of our farmers. Yes, sir.
So earlier you mentioned that, you know, in the coffee industry there is a lot of challenge or gaps and everything in terms of industry. So you mentioned that we need more researchers or something to do, but can you give us some insight, like, so from different industries or expertise, or I don't know, but
Yeah.
what can be incorporated into a coffee business that support the coffee
Yes.
business locally?
Yes.
internationally?
So the first one is you actually have to do from production. If you don't have any production, if the production is stuck, then we're stuck. I mean, I only roast, whether it's a green coffee or a value addition. We don't sell what we don't have. So the first fundamental thing as a country that we need to do is how do we increase productivity? If you look at Brazil comes up with 2-3 different varieties that gives a better yield, and that are CBD or disease resilient varieties. Every 6-7 months there's a new variety that actually goes directly with the right environment and so on and so forth. So the productivity, if you're looking at just our next door Kenya, I mean there's a lot of conditions in terms of why, but just the productivity in Kenya is probably 4 or 5 times. Ethiopia have one of the lowest productivity per hectare in the world. I mean, we're just lucky. Our coffee tastes good. I mean, it's just a God-given gift for us as well, or it's our gift to the world. But our productivity is one of the lowest. I think just Mother Nature has been very kind to us in terms of giving us the best coffee varieties as well. But we haven't done anything. The last probably coffee variety that came in from Jimma University Research Institute, which is the only research institution in Ethiopia, which we need to do a lot more, is probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. So we need to get going. We need to do a lot of soil analysis, and this variety goes very well with this kind of stuff as well. So we need to do, how do we make sure that we get all these new varieties out, and a lot more research that needs to be done. We need to have a lot more people in there. At least we need to come up with one variety every year. 8 years ago, there was a cherry berry disease, they call it CBD, that came in and wiped out Ethiopia. So for the first time, we start doing research at that point as well. Since then, we've been lucky, so nobody have done any research. So another CBD variety comes in Ethiopia, we're gonna be doomed again. So how do we make sure that we keep up with the rest of the world? How do we make sure that we at least cope up with our neighbors in Kenya to make sure that the productivity goes out as well? How do we make sure that we train the right people? How do we make sure we have the right varieties, and do a lot of research and a lot more agronomists in that field as well? So that's something else that we need to do. We need to embolden. If you tell me, would even Jimma researchers, is it well established, well funded? And I don't think so. We need to do a lot more. We need to create all these universities to make sure there's a research. I mean, it's the #1 commodity in Ethiopia. So we need to do a lot more in terms of, promoting this product as well. So we need to do a lot more research to make sure that, I think that's, for me, that's the #1 that needs to get done as well. And I think we also need to take care of nature. I mean, 100%, I can say 100% of Ethiopian coffee is shade grown. So it's not, we don't have any, it's just all rain fed. So for sure, if weather goes bad, and we're actually seeing it in some of our farms as well, then we really messed up as well. So we don't have any irrigation system in our farm as well. So we need to take care of our environment. This climate change is no joke, and we're actually seeing it as well. In fact, Ethiopia is somewhat protected because we are in a high altitude area, so it's not impacting us as the rest of the world. But you'll see it then in Latin America, and climate change is actually impacting us as well. It's also, we're seeing a lot of inconsistent, rain or, ice. We were able to produce only 30% 2 years ago because of the rain was not right as well. So we need to we need to make sure that we take care of our rain as well. Everybody, I was speaking 3 weeks ago in a panel, and everybody was actually giving it an example about Ethiopia, how we're gonna grow, and everybody is talking about, we need to go into manufacturing, and another panelist, and most of them are household names, and somebody said, we need to do into minerals and all of that kind of stuff, and it came my term, and I just said, and somebody said, the war needs to stop, which the war needs to stop, that's right. And when it comes to, I just said, I just hope it rains on time this year in Ethiopia. Because if we miss that one cycle, then, it's pretty much in, 80% and 90%, our economy is based on agriculture. So we need to do a lot more research, and that needs to happen now before it's too late. Yes.
Thank you. Could you perhaps elaborate a bit more on how you penetrate
I'll be very
the market?
short-winded from now on, so that I say a lot of, I don't want to keep everybody here, but yes.
I was just saying, could you perhaps elaborate a bit more on how you penetrated the market initially, and also a bit more about your JV partners?
Yes.
And how useful was that towards you in terms of your journey?
Yeah. Bill Gates once said he'd rather be lucky than smart any day. So, I mean, at some point I was also lucky because I found some partners that are already in the coffee field. Because that's also another one in the coffee space. You can have a lot of partners, but if they don't know any coffee, I think that's the problem with the value-added coffee as well. Because the shelf life is different. With green coffee, you sell it in bag, you ship it to a trader, then he actually distributes it as well. And there's only 7-8 countries that produce coffee. but there's a million roasters, much better than us, much efficient than us in the world as well. So how do you make sure that you have the right partner in terms of that? In our case, we actually created another coffee company in the Netherlands that actually promote our brand promise, that actually also do a lot of marketing for us as well. So I was lucky in that sense as well in terms of identifying, you know, the right partners that are actually working in coffee as well. Because sometimes, and particularly when in a commodity like coffee, it's very difficult because, you know, creating a brand, the minute that you actually, an IKEA tender, if you look at the top 3, it's, you know, they have a market turnover 1,000 times more than Moyee. It's the Elisa, the Nestle, the Lavazza's, and the Starbucks as well. So identifying the right, and I think that looking at the bigger picture. In our case, you know, looking at the bigger picture, the story, you know, that's the kind. I mean, finding your niche is actually. I mean, you can't compete, you know, on every kind of coffee for a lot of the reasons that I have as well. So, in our case, finding that JV, we make sure that we do not select them only for the money. We select them somebody who actually supports the brand promise, somebody who actually believes in it, somebody who's in it for a very long haul. You know, so if you actually have a good story and you have a good plan, the money is there. Like anything else as well, the money is there. I mean, we don't even have time. I mean, Harmella does a lot of these funding requests, and we have a lot of donors that actually believe in the cause right now to actually implement it as well. But you need to create that brand promise first. You need to deliver on that as well. So that's, you just need to make sure that you have the right match, and particularly with the roasted coffee, it goes directly to the shelf. So if you have a recall, then what happens if you don't have a warehouse in there? You know, so and a lot of the supermarkets in Europe, they're very expensive. The shelf lives are very expensive as well. So if you're paying for the shelf life, you need to make sure that you're replacing it all the time. Otherwise, you get kicked out as well. How do you make sure that you promote it as well? Because the minute your sales doesn't go right, somebody else is gonna come and you're 100 to 100. And where's the? Oh, there's a good book. He actually failed. Maybe I can communicate to you. And it's actually a great read. It's a Ugandan guy that tried to create a coffee company. It's a great book, and I can't think of it right now, but maybe you can just read it. It's a fantastic read. Very bad ending from a personal note. He divorced his wife for his work and all that kind of stuff. But the story is a fantastic read in terms of how you get there. But how do you make sure that you need to make sure you have people on the ground? Then you also need to make sure in the coffee market, or I guess in any retail, what is my market? Is it B2B? Is it B2C? Is it retail? In our case, what we discovered was it's much better to go B2B. That you have somebody like IKEA, I send it to one IKEA, then my headache is done. It's up to IKEA in terms of how they distribute it to their 50,000 stores. If you want to do this, you know, the mail-in and the DHL, it's very difficult unless you have somebody else who has a warehouse, who need to consistently push, who need to consistently market as well. Even in a supermarket as well. So if you're not there, or if you're the right person is monitoring it, it's very difficult, if you know what I mean, because you're competing with a lot of the multinationals who have a very suburb supply chain model. Yes.
Okay, let me bring the old school Orthodox way asking people going back in school. So first, I would like to say thank you. The road was not easy, and happy for you. I mean, you're today, right now, you're here. So I'm asking 2 questions. The first one is your tips for new roasteries. Because in the family business, we have farms and some sites, dry milling and washing stations. So we are crawling to start the roastery facilities in Addis. So what's your tips? Could you be kind and tell us more about roastery? And the other is about yourself, your company, Moyee. Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years from now? Thank you.
I think the first one is obviously you can start small. We started small. Otherwise, the new roasting machines, we just put something, you know, $1 million. It's the technology is so, because if you start small, then you can also control your quality as well, because your quality is extremely important in terms of in the international market as well. So now they like small gadgets that you can control your roast profile. I mean, if you see our roastery works, you know, it's like literally it's technology that is actually running it as well. On a side note, we're actually taking a lot of flack now while we're not hiring more people. From a country perspective, we we gotta land by saying that we're gonna hire X amount of people. But now we have these machines that do, like the picking, for instance, that much does it a lot faster, and it's equivalent. One machine can do a job of 20, 30, 40, 50 pickers. I feel bad for our pickers, and I want to make an impact as well. But these machines are actually much more efficient. So without these machines, then we cannot be competitive as well. So it's a double-edged sword in terms of how you want to do it for the government and the job creation perspective. So start small. They're like now nice, good technologies that you can do it. But in the meantime, try to create your branding, your packaging, because that's what people see. Try to work on your quality. Start small, then you can actually do it as well. I think that's probably my take. I don't know if you want to add more onto it as well. So you start small, concentrate on quality, then do it. To ask your second question, I think we want to push. We want to continue to bake. We're actually doing a lot of work on climate smart. We want to track the IKEAs of the world. We want to grow with our existing clients, and hopefully we can create a brand that can outlast the current people that are actually working on it as well. And hopefully we'll create a true multinational out of Ethiopia, and then everybody, be proud at seeing an Ethiopian product. That's what makes me going. When I go to the Netherlands and I see, the shelves of Albert Heijn, which we're actually serving now, and we see Moyee in there as well, and that gets us going. That gets the team going. So we want to create a really brand and have it actually, and this perhaps even extending a lot of our fair chain philosophy to other countries, the Kenya, the Uganda, and working with a lot of our growers in that area as well is something else that we probably can actually do it as well. But each of the area, now we're actually opening, we have a lot, the farming process that we actually expand, the roasting can also expand, and the cafes is also a nice, way. For somebody like me that likes to talk, I like the cafe business as well, so it's...
I would like to celebrate people like you personally, and what we have we don't really award entrepreneurship in this country. We award athletes, and yeah, I will stand for that. So I think awarding people like Ahadu will be, let's do a fair clapping for her. As you do fair chain and fair trade, so that's really important. I think I would like to ask you about somehow off a bit question from coffee.
Sure.
And I would like to focus in terms of community here. So it has been 3-4 years since we established the social enterprise Ethiopia, with this community, of course, and for the purpose that this community grows in terms of providing this country an inclusive economy, which you are trying to do and which you have already achieved. 80% in terms of export share is really, really amazing, and this is really unthinkable. This is building a pyramid, in a country where we have very scarce resource, electricity, all the challenges you're telling us earlier, So amazing, the marketing strategy, that you open the office in Netherlands. That's, I think, something that we can also tap into in the future as we grow our businesses individually. So what do you think is that you can really contribute into this community, and what kind of projects you can actually do with and through social enterprise Ethiopia? I think that will be very important for me as a member and as a worker as well. Thank you.
Keep up on the board.
And the board.
I know you need to stay there.
You want to be the board.
I think it's something else that we can actually think about it as well. We can open our books, we can open our roasteries, and we can do a lot more training in terms of the sector as well. I think there's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot to be done as well. We can also promote, agronomists, people who have a passion to come and see it. Just going outside in this nature and come back is just a very fulfilling. Looking at the coffee, just the culture by itself around the washing station, because you pick the coffee at night, you wash it until the middle of the night with 5,000 people, chatting and singing and picking the coffee. So we can actually do a lot more in terms of empowering, people to join and it's also. Until recently, roasting it's a science in the international world. Coffee is the second biggest traded commodity after oil and gas. So Ethiopia gave birth to coffee, but we haven't done anything in terms of developing, cultivating coffee as well. So there's just so much that needs to be done, and so that so much that we learn, so we can actually share, whether it's at the farm gate or hosting events or teaching people, or we now have an agronomist and a chemist and a mechanics and engineers that actually work in our facility, that we can actually open the doors and we can do a lot more seminars, so on and so forth. I think that's something else that we can collaborate, and would love to do this thing more and more, so people have a better understanding of our sector. That's something else that we can definitely do. We can promote events at our farms, so it's something else, even for you guys. I mean, to go ahead and to strategize, looking at our lodge and in the farm, it's something else that you can actually get a lot more out of it as well, in terms of how much we can give back to a community. The other thing that I don't know how I forgot, but the other big thing that we do as a Moyee philosophy is 10%, and again, this is, I'll be a little bit tough, of our gross revenue, not our net, our gross revenue, we invest it in the community, which is extremely critical. The reason is, fair trade is good, but like I said, farmers said, like me and Hermela, like you and I, we have a self-interest as well. I have a kid and I'm trying to maximize, but how about the community is also very important. So 10% of our proceeds goes there, build schools. Our farm actually built in Bongao, an elementary school, we build roads and, build a lot of infrastructures as well. Because without a community, it's very difficult. It's also, but part of it is also taking care of our farmers, but you also need to make sure, because farmers also have a self-interest as well. Yes, they are a big strategic component, the strategic partners in our business model, but we also need to make sure that we take care of the community as well, because we just need to make sure the community needs to work with you as well, and a lot of otherwise it's also difficult to actually do the work as well. Yeah, and I think as you grow, the other thing is you also need to be surrounded by a good talent, a good management people, and actually I keep on forgetting that people that actually share your value as well. For a very long time I was trying to do a whole lot of stuff, and it's just so much that you can do, and I actually get distracted. So surrounding it by a good team is also very critical. In our we've done a lot more in the last 2 years, bringing the right people, in the Moyee management as well. So I'm also extremely thankful. I don't say it loud, but for people like Carmela, and that actually joined us, that actually believe it, and that keeps me in check in terms of making sure we were doing the right thing and pushing us forward as well. It's like it's like a president, like President of America. They take a lot of hits, or they take a lot of glory for turning around the economy, but sometimes they take a lot of credit, or they take a lot of hit. But unless you have the institution, it's difficult. You need to have a lot more people. You need to have a right talent actually to push you forward, and give you a lot of that energy in these difficult times to push you forward as well. So there's a lot of late nights and frustrating nights, and rejects, and clients say I don't want it, and so there's a lot of long nights that you need that energy to get it going.
It's interesting that people who are successful are also very humble, and with humility say something about success. And so I'm really, really delighted by the many stories you shared. Going back, investing back into the community is something that we all have to do, so we can all move forward together. And sustainability, and we've gone through everything that we as social enterprises and entrepreneurs like to take. So we thank you so much. We wish you luck. I think the question, I think it was you, who asked what he would be, or what Moyee would be doing in 10 years' time. I can see him at a desk, a social enterprise Ethiopia Association, giving some advice to young people who are starting out. So maybe that might happen in 10 or 15 years' time, we hope. But thank you for being so generous with us and inviting us to come and see your farms, and it's just a pleasure to have you. It's an honor for us to have you. So thank you so much.
Actually, it feels good when people clap.
For the board member, something that we want to try and develop, as you know, is to try and have an award ceremony, and so to celebrate people like Ahadu. So we're working on that.
And thank you, Ahadu, for having us. And I mean, I take a lot of credit, but it's a lot of people behind me that actually do all of the work. But thank you for having me. Good luck, and you guys doing great things. So Ambassador, also thank you for having us, and hopefully you'll support us in this endeavor. It's a big journey, and Switzerland is also a big partner in the coffee business. So it's thank you for opening the door, and thank you for everybody else for sitting into this. I didn't think it would be this exciting. I thought I was joking on the car. I said, okay, 30% of the people actually leave before I finish. So thank you for your patience and for sticking around, and thank you.
I'd like to also, in the name of Social Enterprise Ethiopia Association and everyone here, we'd like to thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so much.
And Ambassador, because you let us in your house. So this is all the coffee varieties that we have as well. I mean, so enjoy drinking all the different varieties.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. So this is a grade 1 specialty Yerga. So make sure you drink it yourself. Don't give it to others. And I know you are a Moyee fan, so thank you for having me as well.
I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the board. So many of you are here. This is really a family, almost run organization. We're together and we're supportive of each other. Thank you for your support. And thank you also for Damnet, who's my sidekick throughout the past years as I joined Social Enterprise Ethiopia. And thank you so much. I would encourage everyone who is not a member to join us. We are a dynamic group of entrepreneurs. We've had at least an impact on 4 million people's lives for the better, and we're still counting. So join us if you feel inspired, and if you feel that you're able to lead a life of purpose with us. I'd like to, today, as you know, the Ambassador said, today is Social Enterprise Day, and we want to do one launch. As you know, we're coming out of a conflict, and we would like to, Social Enterprise Ethiopia Association, are launching today an IDP collection campaign. If I can speak in Amharic, የተፈናቀሉትን ወንድምና እህቶቻችን ሰፖርት ማድረግ ስለምንፈልግ ኮሌክት እናድርገን። ገንዘብም ቢሆን ምግብም ቢሆን ኤኒቲንግ ልብስም ቢሆን እኛ ጋር እንትን ነገር ፌስቡካችን ላይ ፕሊዝ ታያላችሁ። 3 ቦታ እንደ ዴፖ የምንጠቀመውና እስከ ኖቬምበር 30 ድረስ የምንቀበለውን ወደ እነሱ እንልካለን እና ከአምረፍ ጋር አድርገን ነው የምንሰራው። ስለዚህ we just want you to be aware, and if you want to contribute, please contact us. Please watch our Facebook page. Tomorrow this will be posted, and probably later on we will also post this campaign. So please join us, and I'd like to thank you all for coming. And now, thank you. So the cocktails are outside, and the networking session will be open now. So once again, thank you for coming. Thank you.